Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world where the wind howls through wooden cracks. Your toes are always just a bit too numb, and comfort is mostly theoretical. We're plunging straight into the frost-bitten reality of a medieval peasant's winter, where central heating means huddling next to something vaguely on fire, and dinner might just be yesterday's turnip stew reheated over embers you hope aren't completely dead. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always cool to see this sleepy little community stretch across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the brittle crust of early snow, every step a squeak beneath your worn leather shoes. It's not even proper winter yet, and already your breath fogs in the morning light like steam off a boiling cauldron. Your fingers, barely shielded by thin, fingerless wool mitts, ache with a throb that says, "Welcome to 5 months of misery." And home? Home is a structure so drafty it feels like someone designed it as a wind tunnel. The walls are made of wattle and daub, a sticky, miserable mix of clay, straw, and animal dung slapped between crooked timber beams. It's not exactly Fort Knox. You push open the heavy door, more a slab of warped wood than an actual door, and are met with a gust of smoke. Always smoke. The hearth is going, barely, and the soot stains above it form a charcoal mural of past winters. You crouch to stoke the fire, which hasn't so much been burning as sulking. A few pathetic sparks leap up, and you nurse them like they're the last hope of civilization. It's a delicate ritual. Too much air, and the fire dies. Too little, and it never really lives. Firewood, by the way, is rationed tighter than gossip at a monastery. You don't burn logs, you negotiate with them. The floor is packed dirt, swept smooth with a broom made from bundled twigs. Above you, bundles of drying herbs and the occasional smoked fish dangle from the rafters like some rustic horror mobile. Every now and then, a fleck of ash or an unlucky spider drops onto your head, a quiet reminder of gravity and nature's general disinterest in your comfort. Now, let's talk insulation. You grab fistfuls of straw and begin stuffing it between the wall beams again. That straw is your best friend. You shove it into your boots, line your bedding with it, even use it to patch holes in your tunic. It crinkles constantly, so you're never truly sneaking up on anyone. If anything, your life sounds like someone rustling through an eternal snack bag. As the wind howls outside, you glance toward your bed, or more accurately, the communal nest. It's a low wooden frame packed with straw, 2 mangy wool blankets, and at least 3 other people, none of whom you necessarily like. The mattress is not soft. It's a lumpy topography of straw, flattened like it's been negotiated over in a treaty. But before you curl up for what passes as sleep, you pull on your best protection. Sheepskin. It's stiff, heavy, smells vaguely like fermented barnyard, and somehow still lets in the cold like an overly polite bouncer. Historians still argue whether peasants slept in full-day clothes out of practicality or because undressing meant freezing to death. Either way, you're keeping your belt on. You also layer up. Wool over linen, then another layer of wool, and then a cloak that feels more like a soggy rug than fashion. It's not warm. It's less cold. And this is important. Warmth isn't a thing you have. It's a thing you chase, and lose, and chase again. Your breath curls out in silvery coils as you finally sit down by the fire, if only to delay your inevitable bedtime. You reach for a cup of warm ale, not because you enjoy it, but because it's the closest thing to a warm beverage, and water's either frozen or questionable. The ale's flat, faintly sour, and has floaters you don't want to investigate. But it dulls the chill, or your judgment, maybe both. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters, and for a brief second, you wonder what life is like for the nobility. Do they have fires that stay lit? Rooms that aren't crossbred with a wind tunnel? Bedding that doesn't bite back? It's a fleeting thought. You go back to tending your tiny fire and wrapping your feet in rags. A neighbor knocks, more like thumps, on the wooden frame of your door, asking to borrow a little kindling. That's medieval speak for, I'm cold, desperate, and hoping you're slightly less miserable than I am. You give them a stick, maybe two. Community, after all, is the only thing slightly warmer than your hearth. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some households, lacking enough wood, would burn dried animal dung. It's called peat, but don't let the name fool you. It's exactly what it sounds like. You can't tell if it smells worse going in or coming out of the fire. But it does burn. Sort of. If you squint and lie to yourself. You lie back on your creaky bed, listening to the rhythmic wheeze of your relatives asleep beside you. One of them kicks. Another snores like a dying goat. You sigh, pull the scratchy wool blanket tighter, and think, just for a second, about spring. Only 4 more months, maybe 5, depending on the mood of the sun. And as the wind moans outside like a ghost who's disappointed in your life choices, you close your eyes, not for rest, but for the simple act of not looking at anything for a while. The bed is a battlefield, and you're losing ground fast. There's a toe in your rib cage, someone's elbow gently crushing your windpipe, and the blanket, such as it is, has migrated entirely to one side, clutched like buried treasure by the warmest sleeper among you. There's no use fighting it. Sharing a bed with your entire family is less about rest and more about containment. You try to curl up without disturbing the dog, who is somehow the warmest and least annoying member of this communal bundle. He sighs as you shift, tail twitching in annoyance. Your little sister snores like a broken bellows, and your uncle has taken to muttering Latin phrases in his sleep ever since he visited that weird monk 2 villages over. You wonder, not for the first time, if sleep is overrated. Beds are a luxury. Not everyone even has one. Some just sleep on sacks of straw thrown on the dirt floor. You, fancy peasant that you are, have a frame. Wooden, rough-hewn, squeaky as a gossiping fishmonger. The mattress? A tightly packed bag of straw that you very occasionally remember to replace. Emphasis on occasionally. It's flat, itchy, and smells like old feet and damp. And don't forget the lice. They're not guests. They live here. You share that bed with them too. Dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of them, depending on how the week's been. Some say washing with vinegar helps. Others swear by boiling your clothes. You haven't got the vinegar, or the fuel, or frankly, the will. You try to steal some warmth by inching closer to the middle of the bed. Big mistake. You bump into someone's knee, and now you're awake and bruised, lay there staring into the darkness, listening to the sounds of the sleeping hut, the wheeze of breath, the occasional creak of the wind pressing against the thatched roof, the distant yelp of some animal that sounds a little too close to the door. Every now and then, someone shifts, sending the entire bed into a gentle wave motion. And just when you think you finally found a semi-comfortable position, a foot finds your face. You remind yourself, again, that this is normal. In fact, historians still argue whether sleeping in these tight quarters created stronger family bonds or just more creative methods of passive-aggressive revenge. You think about those rare, blissful nights when someone is away, maybe working late in the fields, maybe helping with lambing over the next hill. The bed has space, glorious, sacred space. But tonight is not one of those nights. Tonight is elbows and farts and the occasional whispered prayer that someone will shift just 2 inches that way. Your clothes, which you haven't taken off in 3 days, okay, maybe more, are stiff and hold their own shape when you finally peel them off. But it's too cold to go without. And even if you did undress, you'd have nowhere to hang your garments where they wouldn't freeze into fabric popsicles. One poor fellow in the village tried hanging his linen shirt near the door one night. It shattered, like actual glass. Sometimes, during the deepest parts of the night, when your body is numb and your mind drifts, you dream of a real bed, one with pillows, maybe a feather mattress, maybe even, dare you imagine it? A bed where you sleep alone. But that's pure fantasy. The kind of fantasy only nobles or monks with corner rooms get to indulge in. Now, let's not forget the role of livestock in your sleeping arrangement. Yes, the family sleeps together. But in winter, the animals might join too. Chickens, a goat if you're lucky, maybe even a pig. The body heat helps, and the manure, well, that's just part of the decor now. One chicken insists on roosting at your feet. She's got a personality. She also smells like roasted despair. In one village story, passed from mouths missing half their teeth, someone once trained their goose to sit on their chest for warmth. The goose, however, didn't appreciate being a living hot water bottle and promptly bit their nose off. Whether it's true or not, it's been repeated often enough to have entered legend. You shift, sigh, and try again to drift off. This time, you succeed, only to be woken half an hour later by someone coughing. Not just a polite little tickle either. The kind of deep, wet hacking that makes you sit up, eyes wide, wondering if you'll all still be breathing by morning. Illness, after all, spreads faster than gossip. And no one wants to be the first one down when the pox or ague rolls into town. In the meantime, your breath still fogs the air, and your nose has gone entirely numb. You burrow deeper into the straw, trying to find one patch that's not been flattened by generations of restless limbs. It pokes your spine. You don't care. It's better than being in the middle, where everyone rolls toward you like logs down a muddy hill. Oddly enough, this chaotic arrangement has its perks. The shared body heat is vital. You've heard stories, real ones, of solitary travelers freezing to death in their sleep. But clustered together like mismatched puzzle pieces, your family keeps one another just warm enough not to die. Comfort is relative. Survival is, well, survival. And it's not just your family. Travelers to medieval villages often remarked on how houses were filled with life. People, children, animals, all crammed together under one roof. Privacy wasn't just rare, it was non-existent. You could sneeze and hit 4 people. As you try to find sleep once more, you become weirdly grateful for the scratchy blanket, the twitching dog, even your cousin's infernal toe. It means you're still here, still warm enough, still surrounded by the noisy, snoring proof that life, despite everything, goes on. Your eyelids flutter. The fire has gone down to a whisper. Your mind drifts past the complaints, the creaks, and the constant scent of unwashed wool. It's not luxury. It's not peace. But it's sleep. Sort of. You wake up to the sound of something breaking. Probably the bread. It's morning, maybe. Hard to tell. The light seeping through the shuttered window is gray and uncertain, like it's also not thrilled to be here. You sit up, or try to, rubbing sleep from your eyes with fingers that feel like they've been dipped in icy porridge. There's already movement in the hut. Someone's stoking the fire, someone else is arguing with a chicken, and your stomach is making noises that could attract wolves. Time for breakfast, if you can call it that. You shuffle over to the table, a glorified plank on legs, and look at what's available. Bread. The kind of bread that's seen better days, weeks ago. It's hard. Very hard. So hard, in fact, that it clinks when you drop it onto the table. That's your first warning. The second is when you bite into it and nearly crack a molar. The crust is basically armor. Inside, it's dense and chewy, if slightly damp from last night's snow leak. It's sour, slightly off, and carries a faint taste of the wood smoke that saturates everything. If you're lucky, you'll soften it with broth. If you're not, you chew like a beaver gnawing a barn beam and hope your teeth don't file themselves down to stumps. This is winter fare, and it's not about pleasure. It's about not dying. Again. The bread was likely made weeks ago, during a brief flurry of oven activity when someone had enough flour and motivation. It was dried near the hearth, stored high to avoid rats, and has now entered its final phase of life as a jaw workout. You dip it in weak ale, lukewarm always, and nibble while staring into the fire, wondering if today will be colder than yesterday. Spoiler, it probably will be. Mainstream fact break. In many parts of medieval Europe, peasants relied heavily on black bread, a dense rye loaf that kept well and filled the belly. It was nutritious, sure, but also dull enough to put your taste buds to sleep. In cold seasons, bread would often freeze overnight, making breaking bread an uncomfortably literal morning activity. Quirkier tidbit? Some peasants used old bread as trenchers, edible plates. After meals, those soggy bread plates would either be eaten, fed to pigs, or given to the poor. Recycling at its finest. Unless it was frozen solid, in which case it was more likely to be used as a weapon than dinnerware. Now, back to your morning misery. You poke through the food stores, hoping for something soft. There's a bit of root vegetable stew left, turnips, mostly, and maybe a potato if someone was feeling fancy. It's been sitting by the fire in a cracked clay pot, and has the consistency of sludge. But it's warm. You slurp it with numb lips, ignoring the grit at the bottom. Next to the hearth, a pot of water hisses as it boils, or tries to. Water has become a strange and dangerous thing. Leave it too long, and it freezes. Heat it too quickly, and it cracks the pot. Drink it raw, and you're gambling with your intestines. Water's complicated, Food, fire, and fingers are your morning trifecta. If all three are functional, it's a good day. You step outside for a moment, just long enough to see your breath puff out like a ghost escaping your lungs. Everything is quiet and brittle. The frost clings to the trees. The path is slippery with frozen mud, and somewhere, off in the distance, a rooster is questioning all his life choices. Winter in the medieval countryside is not white and magical. It's gray. Gray skies, gray smoke, gray moods. Even the snow, once it's been walked on a few times, turns to slush the color of regret. It cakes onto your boots and freezes there, adding an extra half-pound to each foot. Back inside, your fingers ache from exposure. You hold them over the hearth, wincing as the feeling slowly returns. Pins and needles. Every morning starts like this. Every evening ends the same. Now, let's talk hunger. It's not the sharp pangs of someone skipping lunch. It's the dull, grinding kind of hunger that settles into your bones and whispers rude things about your life choices. By February, stores are low. Root vegetables are wrinkled. Meats are smoked into oblivion. And any preserved fruits taste mostly like vinegar and broken promises. Historians still argue whether the hunger gap, the lean months between late winter and spring, was worse than recorded or just part of a normal peasant rhythm. Either way, you're living it now. You pick at what's available and try not to think about the months ahead. Someone once tried making a soup from boiled bark. It worked, technically. It also gave half the family splinters on their tongues. Lesson learned. Bark is not broth. And still, you trudge through it. You work, you eat what you can, and you learn to appreciate the little things, like the sudden gift of warm broth when someone leaves it near the fire a few extra minutes, or finding a bit of dried apple tucked into the food chest, long forgotten and miraculously mold-free. That's what passes for excitement in your world. Of course, there are feast days, holy days when the church says, "Thou shalt eat better." And you do, for about half a day. A bigger chunk of meat, maybe some cheese if the cow's been generous. But then it's back to cold crusts and turnip stew. Still, those days are like golden stars in a long gray sky. You cling to them, remembering the taste of butter like it was a childhood dream. And through it all, bread remains your constant. Crusty, cracked, sometimes moldy, often frozen, but yours. You carry it in your satchel, gnaw it during breaks, dip it in whatever's left in your bowl at night. It's not joy, but it's fuel. Your teeth may not thank you, but your stomach will. You try not to scratch. You really do. But when every fiber on your body is made from scratchy, unwashed wool and linen, and everything alive on your body seems to have fleas, it becomes less of a choice and more of an involuntary reaction. Your cloak, once a proud shade of brown, mud or dye, no one really remembers, is draped across your shoulders like a slightly damp shroud. It doesn't so much keep the cold out as politely inconvenience it. The edges are frayed, the seams stitched again and again, and the whole thing smells like smoke, sheep, and your uncle's feet, which, coincidentally, it once covered during last winter's particularly cold fortnight. You sit by the hearth again, your favorite spot, because it's the only one where you can pretend to feel the tips of your toes. You pull your cloak tighter, which doesn't help. Your tunic underneath is made of coarse wool, the kind that could exfoliate skin on contact. Beneath that is a linen shift, equally scratchy and a bit stiff from being washed in water that never fully rinses away the ash soap. Clothes aren't just garments. They're a multi-purpose defense mechanism. Against cold, yes, but also against chafing, windburn, and, when they get thick enough, your own crushing sense of despair. You layer up, not for fashion, but for survival. You'd wrap yourself in moss if it worked. Mainstream fact: medieval peasants wore clothes made from materials available nearby, mostly wool from their own sheep and linen from flax plants they processed by hand. The process was long, back-breaking, and produced fabric that was durable but never luxurious. Color, if you had any, came from natural dyes: onion skin for yellow, woad for blue, and crushed beetles for, well, surprisingly nice reds. But even that was a luxury, and you, my friend, are very much not living a luxury life. As you reach down to adjust your second pair of socks, which are really just strips of old tunic tied around your ankles, you feel something scuttle. You pause. You hope it's just a beetle. It might be a louse, or worse. You've heard tales of folks who found a rat had taken up residence in a rolled cloak. You don't look too closely. Denial is warmer. Here's a fringe detail for you. Some medieval folks experimented with sewing small fur linings into their garments. Not always mink or rabbit, mind you, but squirrel. Yes, squirrel pelts. You can imagine the negotiations involved in convincing enough squirrels to contribute their coats voluntarily. Spoiler, they didn't. Squirrel fur wasn't just warm, it was prestige. For you, though, it's more likely that you're just stuffing tufts of whatever you can find. Goose down, if you're lucky, sheep shearings, if you're realistic, into the gaps in your sleeves. As the day progresses, and you move about the village, fetching water, gathering sticks, avoiding yet another urgent request to dig out the privy, your clothes start to ice up. Not metaphorically, literally. The hem of your cloak stiffens, your mittens freeze where they've soaked in melted snow, and every time you breathe near your scarf, it develops a frosty beard. Historians still argue whether peasants in colder climates developed specific regional garments better suited for the elements, or whether they just suffered through it with added layers and gritted teeth. Either way, your experience strongly favors the suffer and grit hypothesis. Back inside the hut after your chilly errands, you peel off your outer cloak, give it a good shake, sending a minor blizzard across the dirt floor, and hang it near the fire. Not too close, though. Your cousin once roasted a hole in his sleeve trying to quick dry it. For 2 weeks, he wore it with a charred patch that made him look like he'd fought a dragon. He hadn't. He just fell asleep near the flames. Now, let's talk about underwear. Or rather, the impressive absence of it. Linen brays, that's medieval talk for baggy shorts, are your go-to if you have them. They're drafty, they ride up, and they're rarely washed. Hygiene isn't ignored entirely, but when you've only got one pair of brays and no soap, your priorities shift. Cleanish becomes a state of mind. Women, of course, had it no easier. Their woolen dresses were heavy, their shifts no better than yours, and their cloaks just as damp and scratchy. At least you don't have to deal with your skirts freezing in puddles. Small mercies. You've tried creative solutions, wrapping your feet in cabbage leaves, tucking hot stones into your boots, once, wearing every piece of clothing you own all at once. None of it works particularly well, but at least it gives you something to talk about during long winter evenings, huddled around a fire and praying it doesn't die out before morning. Oh, and fleas. You definitely have those. You all do. They live in the seams of your tunic, dance merrily through your hair, and make bedtime a scratchy festival of irritation. Sometimes you wonder if they're trying to spell out messages with their bites. You scratch, you grumble, and you live with it. There was a time when you dreamed of soft things. Velvet, fur, maybe a nice, thick, lined coat that didn't smell like goat. That was before. Before you realized that warmth comes in degrees of suffering, and that your best cloak is whichever one doesn't still have a dead moth in the lining. But even in all this, you find rhythm. You repair clothes with the care of a surgeon. You share extra mittens with a neighbor when hers finally fall apart. And when your cloak does finally give in and rip along the back seam, you laugh, quietly, bitterly, and patch it with a strip of old curtain someone gave you in trade for eggs. You sit by the fire again, a little more worn, a little more ragged. You wrap your cloak tighter. It's not warm, but it's yours. You need to go. Nature calls, and not politely. The problem? The bathroom is outside, and the weather is doing its best impression of a vengeful Norse god. You stand at the door of your hut, clutching your cloak like a medieval superhero's cape, mentally preparing for the brief but traumatic journey to the edge of the yard. That's where the latrine is, or if we're being brutally honest, the pit. A shallow, frozen hole shielded only by a couple of leaning boards and a thick sense of denial. You open the door and instantly regret every life choice that brought you to this moment. The cold hits you like a slap. Not a gentle one either. A full-on, wind-assisted face slap that turns your breath into a puff of ice crystals and your nose into a sad red icicle. You shuffle through the crunchy snow, boots crusted with mud and frost, trying not to think about the fact that your bare skin will soon be exposed to air that's actively trying to murder it. This is the true medieval horror story. Winter toileting. No matter how humble your station, some bodily functions remain gloriously democratic. Everyone has to go. And in winter, everyone suffers. The chamber pot, if you have one, is a small clay or wooden bucket with delusions of grandeur. You could use it indoors at night, but then someone has to empty it. And there is no joy in that task. You reach the latrine, nearly slipping on a patch of icy slush someone before you so graciously left. The boards creak as you settle into the most vulnerable position of your day. The wind whistles through the gaps. You don't so much do your business as negotiate with your bladder to finish before frostbite sets in. Mainstream historical fact: yes, chamber pots were common, but most rural peasants relied on outdoor privies, or even just the edge of the field. In winter, this meant braving freezing temperatures in a half-exposed squat. Luxury was for castles and monasteries. And speaking of monasteries, some of them had internal privies with chutes that dumped waste into rivers below. You don't have a chute. You have wind, frost, and the distant sound of someone laughing, probably your cousin, who gets to go after the sun rises. Now, for the fringe tidbit. In some parts of Europe, it was considered healthy to urinate on the fireplace ashes to keep evil spirits away. You're not sure if that was practical, spiritual, or just a desperate way to stay indoors. Either way, you've definitely heard someone try it. You've also heard the sound it makes, and honestly, it's not great. You finish up, do what you can with a frozen scrap of cloth, let's not dwell, and hurry back inside like your life depends on it. Because it might. The warmth of the hut hits you like a feeble hug. You sit by the fire again, trying to forget everything you just endured. But you know it'll happen again. Maybe tonight. Maybe tomorrow morning. That creeping dread of needing to go when the temperature outside is flirting with instant regret. You glance over at the chamber pot. It sits there in the corner like an unspoken agreement between you and the rest of the household. Whoever fills it, empties it. That's the rule. And you're absolutely not losing that game again. Chamber pots are a mixed blessing. Use one, and you don't have to go outside. But now your sleeping area smells like a particularly offensive cheese. And if the pot cracks, which they do, it becomes a highly specialized and extremely unpleasant mop-up operation. Last winter, someone dropped one. It froze to the floorboards. It's still a sensitive topic. You'd think that being constantly cold might numb certain sensations, like the urge to go. It doesn't. If anything, it makes things worse. The body, you've discovered, has a deeply annoying sense of timing. Even the kids aren't spared. They get little chamber pots, sure, but they also have smaller bladders and a worse sense of urgency. Which means that every few nights, someone has an accident, and another pile of straw has to be tossed into the fire to take care of the mess. You're not proud of how often you volunteered to gather more straw just to get out of cleanup duty. One time, your grandmother claimed to have crafted a winter-safe seat for the latrine. She proudly revealed a wooden ring she'd lined with sheepskin. It froze to the post by morning. She hasn't spoken of it since. Historians still argue whether peasants maintained designated latrine areas year-round, or if, in the depths of winter, all sense of order vanished, and people simply used whichever spot was least frozen and most convenient. The latter seems extremely likely based on personal experience. There's also a certain tactical planning required during these months. You start drinking less, not because you're not thirsty, but because you dread what comes after. Fewer drinks mean fewer trips outside. You'll take the dry mouth and slight headache if it means one less nighttime excursion into the frozen void. But of course, this has its own consequences. Dehydration, fatigue, weird dreams about rivers. You once dreamt of a hot bath so vivid you woke up mid-panic thinking you'd melted through the mattress. You hadn't. It was just the dog breathing too close to your leg again. And then, of course, there's dignity. What's left of it? It slips away bit by bit with each winter visit to the pit, each desperate dash into the dark with your cloak flapping behind you like some tragic, freezing hero. Still, you manage. You learn tricks, like breathing out slow so your face doesn't sting, or wearing an extra belt to secure your cloak against the wind. You carve little notches in the doorframe to time yourself. If I'm not back by the fourth notch, send help. You survive, mostly through shared misery, because everyone in the village is doing the same dance. There's solidarity in freezing your rear off while swearing at the moon. And when you return, still shivering, still rattled, you wrap yourself in all the scratchy wool you own and tell yourself, that's the worst part of the day. It can only get better from here. But deep down, you know better. There's still snow to shovel, wood to chop, and supper to unfreeze. And probably another trip outside before bed. The fire is dying again. You sit cross-legged on the packed dirt floor, a crooked stick in hand, poking gently at the last glowing embers like a desperate gambler urging dice to show mercy. One lone spark flares briefly, then vanishes. And with it, goes your last illusion of warmth. It's the middle of the night, or possibly the early hours of morning. Time blurs when your only clock is how numb your fingers feel. The hearth, once the pulsing heart of your home, is now a shallow pit of sullen ash and the skeletal remains of yesterday's kindling. You wrap your cloak tighter. It doesn't help. Your toes, despite the double layer of wool, are curling in protest. You can't remember what warm felt like. Not really. It's more of a concept now, like retirement or a day off. The worst part? You have to get up. If the fire goes out completely, it won't just be cold, it'll be frozen. You'll wake up to frost creeping across your bedding, water jugs turn to ice, and the kind of bone-deep chill that steals the will to live. So, you move. You reach for the woodpile. It's less a pile and more a sad stack of twigs, the bigger logs already spent during last night's desperate blaze. Wood is a currency, and you're nearly bankrupt. There's a frozen knot of kindling under the bench. You scrape it loose, fingers screaming, and feed it into the hearth. Flint, steel, sparks, hope. You strike again and again, your breath coming in plumes, your eyes squinting through the smoke. Finally, the kindling catches. Just barely. You blow gently, praying the flame grows instead of sputtering into nothingness. Mainstream historical fact: peasants kept fires burning continuously if they could, often banking hot embers in ashes overnight to preserve heat. Reigniting a fire from scratch every morning wasn't just inconvenient. It could take hours and drain precious resources like flint or dried moss. You watch the little flame wobble, then surge. You feed it a few twigs and whisper sweet nothings to the fire gods. And then, just when you think it might die again, it catches on a scrap of bark and breathes like a newborn dragon. A weak, wheezy dragon. But you'll take it. The family stirs. Someone coughs in the corner, a wet, barking thing that echoes through the rafters. It's not new. That cough's been a background soundtrack for weeks now, and no amount of garlic, prayers, or foul-smelling poultices has helped. You pass them a warm cloth. It's all you can do. There's always someone sick in winter. You'd blame the cold, but the truth is, the smoke from the hearth does its own damage. It curls up into the thatch, paints the ceiling black, then slowly creeps into your lungs like a polite burglar. Everyone coughs. Everyone wheezes. But fire is non-negotiable. And the fuel? Oh, the fuel. If you're lucky, you've got a small stash of logs collected during the summer. If you're unlucky, which you are, you're down to burning scraps. Twigs, broken furniture, anything vaguely combustible. Peat bricks, when you can find them. Dung patties, if you're desperate. Quirky tidbit. In some regions, peasants used bundles of dried heather as fuel, which burned fast but fragrant. Others turned to dried animal bones or fish oil-soaked cloth. One particularly memorable winter, a neighboring family burned old shoes. The smell lingered well into spring. You remember that. Everyone does. You settle beside the slowly growing flame, warming your palms while the back of your body remains stubbornly frozen. The fire flickers across your face, casting long shadows on the uneven walls. A rat scurries across the beam above. You try not to care. The wood pops, releasing a brief, joyful crackle. You close your eyes and try to pretend it's a real fire, the kind with proper logs and roasting meats, and maybe even a singing lute player in the corner who knows more than 3 chords. But your reality is this. You'll have to head out tomorrow to scavenge more wood. The forest is picked over, and what's left is damp or frozen. You'll spend hours hacking at dead limbs, dragging them home, and then trying to dry them out by the fire you barely managed to start. Historians still argue whether medieval fuel shortages were seasonal blips or chronic conditions. But you don't need a debate. You just need a stick that burns. In the meantime, the fire limps along. You add a bit of straw, not too much, or the whole hearth will flare and smoke you out. It flares anyway. Smoke curls upward, dances in the low rafters, and then decides to hang out at face level. Your eyes sting. You blink. You accept. The kids shift in their straw beds. One rolls too close to the hearth, and you gently nudge them back with a foot. Burn scars are common, and not everyone has enough tunic fabric left to cover them. You think about last winter, when someone's sleeve caught fire mid-supper. It wasn't pretty, but it was memorable. By now, the fire is steady enough to survive the hour. You sit back, exhausted by the sheer effort of maintaining your tiny oasis of heat. Your cloak smells like wet ash and fatigue. Your hands are cracked, nails blackened, skin red from sudden shifts between ice and flame. You think about leaving it, about slipping back under your lumpy blankets. But you know better. You wait. You tend. You coax. Because fire doesn't care that you're tired. It's either alive or dead. And when it dies, you suffer. Eventually, you reach for the kettle, blackened and dented, and set it near the flames. Maybe there's time for a bit of warm ale, or even just hot water with a few mystery herbs tossed in. You don't know what they do, but they smell vaguely like spring and desperation. That's good enough. You stare into the flames, letting the heat kiss your cheeks. It's not much, but in a winter like this, it's everything. Sleep comes in patches, broken, shallow, inconvenient patches. You're curled up on your straw mattress again, listening to the odd symphony of snoring, coughing, and snuffling that plays nightly inside your overcrowded hut. Every once in a while, someone groans in their sleep or kicks the dog, who grumbles, shifts, and promptly starts snoring louder than any human ever could. But just as you're on the verge of dozing off, something clucks. Loudly. You sigh. Because of course the chickens are awake again. They live inside with you. Because it's winter, and your animals are worth more to your survival than any concept of hygiene. A few hens, the old goat, and sometimes even a pig huddle near the fire at night, their warm breath fogging up the air alongside your own. The goat smells terrible and farts without apology. The pig, surprisingly courteous, but loud. Very, very loud. It wasn't always this way. In the warmer months, they stay in the shed, thank you very much. But now, in this season of frost-bitten regrets, they get invited inside like noisy, four-legged roommates with boundary issues. The upside? They're warm. The downside? They're always warm. So warm, in fact, that they keep edging closer to your feet until suddenly you've got a chicken roosting on your ankle. Historians still argue whether this close animal cohabitation was a necessary evil or an efficient system of shared heat. Either way, the result is the same. You fall asleep to the smell of wet feathers and wake up with a goat nibbling your tunic. The daily rhythm of winter living follows the sun's disinterest. The sky brightens, barely, and the animals begin their soft ruckus, clucks, hooves scraping the floor, snorts. They want food. They want out. They have no regard for the fact that you were finally starting to dream about warm pastries and private beds. You get up groggily, stretch, and immediately regret it. Your back cracks like kindling, your knees complain, and your fingers feel like dried beans wrapped in linen. You're 28, but winter has aged you into a weathered 65. First things first, get the animals moving. You usher the pig toward the door with a broom, trying not to slip on anything warm and squishy it might have left behind. The chickens follow, flapping and muttering, and the goat, stubborn as ever, pretends not to notice your efforts. You eventually have to bribe it with a wilted turnip. Out they go, one by one, into the blinding white of the morning frost. You close the door behind them, sighing with relief, and then immediately miss the warmth they provided. You're not the only one missing warmth. Your little brother shuffles out of bed, squinting like he hasn't seen daylight in weeks. He hasn't. None of you really have. You survive by moving as little as possible, conserving energy like a hibernating badger with debt. But the animals, they don't hibernate. They demand. Mainstream fact time. Many medieval peasant homes were single-room buildings. Humans and livestock shared the same space, especially during winter, not only for protection, but also because livestock provided precious body heat that made the cold marginally more survivable. If your house had a loft or raised sleeping area, congratulations. You had medieval bunk beds, minus the stability. Back inside, you scrape a bit of frost from the inside of the window. Yes, inside. And check the sky. More clouds. Always clouds. You can't remember the last time you saw a star. Or the sun, for that matter. Just a vague, glowing blur behind a thick blanket of misery. You sweep the floor half-heartedly, trying to move some of the night's mess into a neat pile. Straw, ash, a chicken feather or 6. A strange, unidentifiable smear that you could investigate, but probably won't. The floor, after all, is just compacted dirt. It has seen worse. It is worse. At mid-morning, the animals come back in, briefly. They stomp snow into the house like they own the place, shake themselves off, and generally act as if they weren't just outside making your life harder. You herd them toward their corner again, throw them some scraps, and pray they settle down for a while. The pig does. The goat doesn't. And sleep? Not happening. Even when you're trying to nap, your ears remain tuned to the constant soundtrack of creature chaos. Hooves thumping, feathers flapping, occasional bleating that sounds like a scream if you're not fully awake. And when you are asleep, your dreams often involve being chased by livestock. There's a story the elders like to tell about a woman who swore her chicken whispered secrets in her sleep. You'd laugh, but last week you dreamed your goat told you where you'd lost your knife. You checked the next morning. It was exactly there. You're still not okay with it. Quirky tidbit? In parts of Scandinavia, peasants trained pigs to detect frostbite in sleeping family members by gently nudging exposed skin. You don't have a frostbite pig. You just have an emotional support pig who snores louder than a monastery bell and likes to lick feet. The animals don't complain about your stink, at least. And you don't complain about theirs. It's a mutual agreement, unspoken but strong. You warm each other, even if you sometimes wake up with straw in your mouth and a hoof in your armpit. As night falls again, you watch them huddle in their little corner. The chickens have made a nest out of a sack of potatoes. The goat has once again claimed the warmest corner of the room. The pig? She's curled up near the fire like she's always owned the place. You settle into your spot once more, feeling their body heat slowly seep across the room like a low tide of warmth. It's not much, but it's just enough. And as you drift off, half listening to a soft cluck and a distant snort, you realize, in a strange, feathered, smelly way, you're all just surviving the winter together. No walls between you, no privacy, just shared breath, shared heat, and a shared hope that tomorrow's not colder than today. You're not a heavy drinker. You're a survival drinker. The ale is warm, not because that's how you like it, but because there's no such thing as refrigeration, and the hearth is your only hope of keeping it from freezing solid. You take a long gulp from the clay mug, its rim chipped and faintly crusted with yesterday's dinner. It's thick, sour, and cloudy, like someone fermented disappointment and added a hint of grass. But it's warm. And in a world where even your dreams come with a draft, that matters. The ale you drink isn't strong. It's what's called small beer. Low in alcohol, barely fermented, made from leftover grains that have already seen better brews. Kids drink it. Grandmothers drink it. You drink it because water is a liar, clear and innocent looking, but just as likely to carry stomach-turning consequences as actual refreshment. If it doesn't come from a covered well or boil for a full 10 minutes, you're better off sipping swamp juice. Historians agree that small beer was a staple of the medieval peasant diet, especially in winter. It was safer than water, slightly nourishing, and contained just enough alcohol to take the edge off your reality without knocking you flat. That last part? Up for debate, especially tonight. You finish your mug with a dramatic sigh. The fire crackles gently beside you. Your fingers, still pink from tending the livestock, loosen. The ale sloshes a bit in your stomach, and for a brief, glorious moment, your body doesn't feel like a collection of brittle twigs wrapped in wool. You consider having another. Your neighbor, old Ralph, once said the best way to stay warm in winter was to pickle yourself from the inside out. Ralph also tried to build a chimney out of mud bricks and nearly smoked his family into the afterlife, so take that advice with a grain of something. Still, he's not entirely wrong. A second cup makes the cold feel less sharp, the floor less hard, the goat less judgy. But you also remember what happened last time you got cozy with a third mug. It started pleasantly. A bit of warmth in the belly, some laughter. You tried to sing a song no one asked for. Then you tripped over your own cloak, knocked over a bucket, and landed face first in the woodpile. You spent the next morning nursing a headache, a splintered cheek, and a vague suspicion that the dog was mad at you. Still, there's something comforting about ale in winter. It's ritual. You sit by the fire, sip slowly, and pretend for a moment that the world isn't trying to freeze your eyebrows off. You pass the jug to your brother, who takes a long drink and immediately makes the face of a man who expected apple cider and got ditch water. You laugh. He throws a potato at you. It bounces. No one's wasting good potatoes on revenge. Here's a quirky bit of trivia. In some areas, villagers believed that ale brewed during the winter solstice had magical properties. Better luck, fewer rats, possibly more babies, depending on how much you drank. One brewer even claimed his ale made your bones sing. You're not sure about that, but after enough mugs, your knees do hum when you walk. You top off your cup with a bit more from the jug, carefully this time. Your hands are steadier now, numb, maybe, or just better practiced. The conversation around the hearth turns lazy. A neighbor grumbles about wolves stealing chickens. Someone else swears they saw a witch's shadow on the hillside last night. You nod vaguely. You're half listening, half feeling your way through the warm glow the ale's lit in your chest. But then the hiccups start. You try to hide it, of course. You're a seasoned peasant. You've handled worse. But no amount of ale can disguise the fact that you now sound like a toad with a chest cold. Your sister throws you a look. The dog groans. Even the pig sighs. You need to lie down. That's your body's way of saying, we've reached the acceptable limit of poor life choices for one evening. You do. Slowly. Carefully. Cloak still wrapped around you like a drunken burrito. Your head thuds onto the straw pillow, and the ceiling spins just a little, like a wagon wheel on too much tilt. Historians still argue whether alcohol consumption in medieval villages led to more camaraderie or more conflict. In your hut, it's both, sometimes in the same night. You've seen two grown men argue over who owns the better turnip crop while passing a jug between them. By the third cup, they're swearing eternal brotherhood. By the fourth, someone's missing an eyebrow. You close your eyes and feel the warmth sinking in deeper. Ale doesn't fix the cold, but it distracts from it. Like a friend who tells you a joke while your teeth chatter out Morse code for help. Of course, there's the morning to worry about. Your dreams are weird on ale. Last time, you dreamt of a sun that never set, and you were trying to sleep under it while the animals held a council to vote you out of your own bed. The pig was especially harsh. You stir in your half-sleep, a bit too warm now. The ale has flushed your cheeks, and the fire has decided to finally cooperate. You stick a leg out from under the blanket. The air bites it immediately. You retreat. And now your head starts to throb. Already? The ale wasn't even that strong. You groan softly, pressing your fingers to your temples. Someone nearby shifts in their sleep and accidentally elbows you. You don't even react. It's the peasant version of a lullaby. Fringe fact before you drift off. Some medieval households tried to purify their ale with herbs. Rosemary, thyme, even wormwood. You tried wormwood once. You still don't remember half that week. The fire pops. The wind whistles through the walls again. Your mug sits empty on the hearthstone, crusting over with a residue that smells like regret. Tomorrow, you'll swear off ale, for the 5th time this week. But right now, it's your lullaby, your shield, your flawed little warmth in a world full of cold. The coughs have gotten worse. You wake up to the damp, ragged hacking of your cousin in the corner. It's the kind of cough that echoes in the chest cavity, sharp and thick, like he's trying to dislodge a pine cone from his lungs. No one moves at first, because what are you going to do? Magic him better? You pull the rough blanket tighter, squinting toward the hearth, where the fire has shrunk to a dim, sulking glow. Your cousin groans and turns over. There's a bucket beside him, just in case. You try not to look too closely. Winter doesn't just freeze you, it sickens you. It creeps into the lungs, infects the joints, drips into every weak point in your body like water through a leaky roof. Colds are common. Flu-like illness, even more so. And then there are the real threats: pneumonia, tuberculosis, and the ever-welcome medieval bonus round, pleurisy. You sigh and rise slowly, every joint sounding like an overworked winch. The air in the hut is heavy, thick with smoke, breath, and that damp scent of wool and wet wood. It's also oddly sweet, thanks to the poultice your mother left simmering in the clay bowl by the fire. It smells like boiled onions, garlic, and swamp. Mainstream historical fact: in the medieval period, illness was a constant companion during winter. Cramped, unventilated spaces, malnutrition, smoke inhalation, and poor hygiene made for a respiratory nightmare. Fevers were treated with prayers, mustard plasters, and medicinal concoctions that mostly tasted like regret and looked like compost. You shuffle toward your cousin and check his forehead with the back of your hand. It's warm. Not the cozy by the fire kind of warm, the oh no kind. His cheeks are flushed, and he's wrapped like a roast in every scrap of fabric he owns. Still, he shivers. The poultice helps. Maybe. Or maybe it's just tradition. Garlic and onion were considered hot foods, meant to draw out illness from the body. You dab some onto a cloth and place it gently on his chest. He moans in protest. You moan in sympathy. Fringe tidbit: some believed that stuffing herbs like sage or lavender up your nose would purify the air and protect against illness. Your aunt tried it last week and sneezed out half a bush. Still, she swears it opened her mind. You take a break by the fire and sip a cup of hot herb water, though it's mostly just warm puddle with leaves. The heat helps your own throat, raw from sleeping next to a snorer and breathing the perpetual soot stew in this hut. It tastes faintly of chamomile and disappointment. Outside, the village isn't faring much better. You've heard of at least 3 more people taken ill in the past week. A boy with chills, an old woman who can barely breathe, a man who coughed blood into his soup and just kept eating. No one has the luxury of stopping. Not really. Historians still argue whether peasants viewed illness as a natural part of winter or as divine punishment. Certainly, both ideas floated around. Some swore by the healing power of prayer. Others rubbed toad fat on their chests. One man claimed his horse cured his gout by standing on his foot. No one tested that one twice. You toss a handful of dried sage into the fire, mostly for the smell. It helps clear the smoke a little. You inhale deeply. Immediately cough. It's fine. You're fine. You help your cousin sit up and feed him a spoonful of hot broth. It dribbles down his chin. He swears it tastes like tree bark. You don't disagree. It was tree bark last winter, when the food ran out early and creativity was your only seasoning. Sickness changes the rhythm of the day. You spend more time tending the hearth, steeping herbs, and wiping brows. Less time hauling wood or patching roofs. But it's a false luxury. The chores pile up. The house smells like wet cabbage. And sleep? Sleep becomes a stolen thing, caught between coughs and the shiver of cold air every time someone forgets to latch the door. Still, you manage. You mix elderflower with honey, what little you've got left, and trick your cousin into drinking it. You wrap his feet in warm cloths, even though his toes feel like icicles. You boil water 3 times just to make sure it won't poison him. You mumble half-remembered prayers. And sometimes, people get better. They sweat out the fever, cough up whatever demons are squatting in their lungs, and stagger back into life with a new appreciation for warm straw and garlic soup. Other times, they don't. No one talks about those times, but the weight of silence hangs like an extra cloak around the fire. You remember last winter, the neighbor boy, pale as milk, quiet as snow. One night he coughed so hard he fell out of bed. By morning, he wasn't moving. They buried him by the hedge, the ground so frozen they had to break it with pickaxes. You remember watching steam rise from the earth like the world was sighing. You try not to think about that now. Your cousin dozes. For the first time all day, his breathing eases. You feel the tension in your shoulders begin to soften, just a little. You let yourself lean back, sip the broth you were saving for yourself, and enjoy its meager warmth. Tomorrow, you'll boil more water, steep more herbs, and hope for the best. Because that's all winter really is for a peasant, keeping hope alive one bowl of soup, one threadbare blanket, one stubborn breath at a time. You stink. There's no point dancing around it. You're aware of it. Everyone else is aware of it. Even the goat, who has absolutely no standards, looks at you like, seriously? But here's the thing. Bathing in winter isn't just rare. It's unwise. There's no running water, no cozy tubs, and definitely no sweet-smelling soaps. Just a big wooden basin, a kettle of boiled water, and a deep, unshakable fear of pneumonia. Still, sometimes the smell gets so bad, even you can't take it anymore. So, you commit. You're going to wash. Not bathe. Let's not get crazy. Just wash. You pull off your outer tunic, hold your breath, and peel back the layers underneath. Each one clings with a sigh, stiff from cold and filth. Your linen undershift feels like it could snap if folded. Your body, pale and goose-pimpled, protests the sudden exposure like a sun-avoiding mole dragged out of its hole. You heat a pot of water over the fire and carefully pour it into the basin. Steam rises, curling into the air like a fragile ghost. You add a splash of cold water so it doesn't peel the skin right off your bones. Then, grimacing, you dip the rag in and begin. You start with your face. Always the face. It's the least offensive. You dab, scrub a bit, and stare into the reflection on the water's surface. You look like someone who's fought a long battle against wind, soot, and disappointment, and lost. Mainstream fact: medieval peasants did try to stay clean, contrary to popular myth. But bathing habits varied widely depending on the season and region. Winter made it almost impossible. People focused on wiping down with warm water and cloth, often cleaning just the face, hands, feet, and, well, the undercarriage. The essential bits, as they say. You switch to your armpits. It's not elegant. The cloth is scratchy, and the water cools fast. You wince. Then you move on. Soap? If you're lucky, you've got a lump of homemade lye soap. It's made with ash, fat, and ambition. Smells like old bacon and burns if it gets in your eyes. You use it anyway, because every little bit helps. Kind of. Fringe tidbit. In some places, people used fermented urine, known as lant, as a cleaning agent. It helped remove grease from clothes and was considered a decent stain remover. You tried it once. Never again. Your tunic smelled like boiled regret for 2 weeks. Once the major grime has been wiped away, you dry off with a square of linen so coarse it could be classified as a loofah. Then comes the challenge, getting dressed again. You steel yourself and reach for your frozen tunic. It resists, crackling slightly as you pull it over your still damp skin. There's no luxury in this process, just layers, shivers, and the faint hope your hair doesn't turn into icicles. Your feet go into stiff socks, then shoes, which haven't dried properly since early November. You wriggle your toes, wondering if they'll ever feel anything again. You tell yourself you feel better, cleaner, lighter. You mostly just feel cold. Of course, not everyone washes regularly. You've got that neighbor, Dirt Tom, who swears the layer of grime keeps out the chill. He once went the whole winter without so much as wiping his nose. By spring, he looked like a statue someone forgot to dust. You step outside to empty the basin, shivering as the wind slices across your damp skin. The steam rises from the water as it splashes into the snow, vanishing like it never existed. You stand for a second, eyes closed, breath billowing in quiet huffs, and listen. No footsteps, no voices, just the wind, and your teeth chattering like they're plotting an escape. Back inside, someone asks if you bathed. You nod. They nod. No one says anything more. It's a shared understanding. We wash when we can. We skip it when we must. And we definitely don't judge. Much. You comb your hair with fingers, tugging at tangles. You remember a time, brief, mythical, when you had a comb. It broke last spring during an unfortunate goat incident. You don't talk about it. You rub beeswax on your chapped hands. Just a little. It's precious stuff. The cracks across your knuckles look like tiny road maps. They sting with every movement, but you've long accepted that soft skin is for noble women and saints. Some nights, when the fire's high and the wind's quiet, you let yourself dream of a bath, a real one, with scented oils, steaming water, and no one else barging in asking to borrow your boots. You dream of soap that smells like flowers, and towels that feel like clouds. You wake up cold and disappointed, tangled in damp wool and the faint smell of garlic. Historians still argue whether the medieval decline in bathing habits came from practicality or shifting religious and cultural attitudes. Either way, the average peasant bathed a handful of times a year, with more frequent spot cleaning in between. And in winter, just forget it. Still, you try. You wash when you can. You scrub your fingernails with a twig. You splash icy water on your face, even when it hurts. Because it's one small act of control. One bit of defiance against the dirt and the chill and the creeping feeling that you're slowly turning into a moss-covered stone. And tonight, as you curl up by the fire with clean-ish skin and half-dry socks, you almost feel human again. You stretch, yawn, and let your head rest on the straw pillow. The pig snuffles beside you. The chicken twitches in its sleep. And you, freshly washed, slightly frozen, drift off in a cloud of smoky steam and faint herbal soap. You're awake again, and not because you wanted to be. Something scraped against the door. Not loud, not even threatening, just enough to snap you out of the fuzzy warmth of sleep and into that distinctly unpleasant state of half-conscious dread. You hold still, listening. Nothing. Then the wind rattles the shutters, and a clump of snow falls off the thatch with a whump. You exhale. just wind. Probably. Still, it's your turn for night watch. You groan softly as you swing your legs over the side of the straw-stuffed bed, wincing as your feet meet the cold ground. The fire's still glowing, but just barely. You toss a twig on for encouragement. It hisses, unhelpfully. You pull on your outer tunic, your cloak, your mittens, which were, until recently, stuffed inside your boots for warmth, and grab your torch and stick. Yes, your stick. Not a sword, not a pike. Just a sturdy bit of wood, because that's what you've got. That, and a whole lot of stubborn. Outside, the cold hits you with its usual lack of grace. The air is sharp enough to slice through your clothes, and your breath turns thick and cloudy in front of your face. You clutch the torch like it owes you money and step out into the darkness, stick in your other hand like some very unimpressive knight. Your job tonight is simple. Walk the edge of the property, make sure nothing's prowling around, animal or otherwise, and, ideally, return without frostbite or emotional trauma. Mainstream fact: many villages organized rotating night watches, even for peasants. Fear of wolves, bandits, or wandering vagrants made nightly patrols a necessity, especially during the long winter nights when threats seemed to multiply in the dark. The snow crunches beneath your boots. Everything is still. The sky above is a charcoal smear, with the faintest glimmer of stars peeking through. You pass the barn, listen for movement. Nothing. The pig is asleep. Lucky pig. The wind howls through the trees like it's trying to remind you of your insignificance. You pull your cloak tighter and tap your stick against the frozen fence posts just to hear something. Anything. Once, years ago, wolves came through the village. You were too young to be on watch then, but you remember the stories, how they circled the pens, silent and calculating. One even dragged off a goat. That night, everyone slept with knives under their straw pillows. It hasn't happened since, but still, better safe than eaten. You round the corner near the chicken coop, eyes scanning the tree line. You half expect to see glowing eyes watching you. You half hope you don't. The torch flickers in the wind, making everything look more sinister than it probably is. Probably. Historians still argue whether such night watches were more about external threats or internal fears. Was it wolves they feared, or just the darkness itself? The uncertainty? You can't answer that, but you do know that standing alone in the dead of winter with only a splintery stick and a fluttering torch makes everything feel like a potential threat. Even the snowdrift that kind of looks like it's breathing. You whisper a half-hearted prayer under your breath, just in case. A noise. Behind you. You spin. Torch up. Stick ready. It's a rabbit. Just a rabbit. It freezes, stares at you like you're the intruder, then hops off into the brush. Your heart thumps. You exhale. You laugh. Softly. Awkwardly. Like someone who almost fought a rabbit with a broomstick. And yet, you still check the chicken coop. You slide open the door, peek inside. The hens are dozing, heads tucked, feathers ruffled like they're just as sick of winter as you are. You close the door gently. Quirky tidbit? Some medieval folks believed certain animals could predict danger. A crowing rooster at midnight? Omen. A restless dog? Ghosts nearby. A twitchy cat? You should probably move. You don't have a cat. You do, however, have a rooster that crows at everything. which means you're either haunted or just very unlucky. You finish your circuit and head back toward the house, trying to walk a little faster without slipping. Your toes are officially beyond cold. They've crossed into that alarming numbness that makes you question if they're still attached. The torch is sputtering. The stick is still a stick. Inside the hut, the warmth hits you like a blessing. Your breath unclouds. Your hands ache as feeling returns. A stabbing reminder that being safe in winter doesn't mean comfortable. You set the torch down, hang your cloak by the fire, and flop back into your nest of straw and blankets. Your sister mumbles something in her sleep and rolls over. The dog lifts its head, gives you a once-over, then sighs back into slumber. You stare at the ceiling for a minute, watching smoke trail across the beams. Safe. For now. Still, you can't help but think about what's out there in the dark. Not just animals, but stories. Things the elders whisper about but never say directly. Spirits in the woods, glowing figures on the road, shadows that don't belong to anyone. You laugh at it in the day, but at night, stick in hand, you remember. You close your eyes. The fire pops. The wind rattles a shutter. And your fingers curl instinctively around your stick, now resting beside your bedding like an old friend. You lie awake in the dark, waiting for your heartbeat to slow. Not because of anything you've done. No, you're trying to sleep. But somewhere across the village, a dog is howling. Long, drawn out, and a little too close to human. It's the kind of sound that makes your skin prickle. And just as the dog quiets, someone else in the hut starts snoring. You roll onto your side, facing the wall, and do your best to block out the noise. But it's not just the dog. It's not just the snoring. It's the stories. The ones that slide into your thoughts like cold fingers under a warm blanket. The villagers have many names for what walks on nights like this. You heard one as a child. The whistling man who moves through the woods leaving a trail of frost and silence. If you hear the whistle, you're safe. If it stops, well, they say that means he's listening. You swore you heard it once while fetching water after sundown. You ran so fast you dropped the bucket. It's silly. You're older now. You know it's just the wind catching the trees the right way. Right? These stories aren't just for fun. They're warnings. The snow hag who lures children into drifts that swallow them whole. The bone lantern, a ghostly light that floats across fields, said to be the soul of someone who didn't share their firewood. The ash dog, made of smoke and soot, that finds huts with cold hearths and curls up on the chest of the sleeping, heavy and suffocating. Historians still argue whether these tales were pure superstition or clever community control. Morality plays in fur cloaks. Maybe both. Either way, they stick. Especially when the fire dims, the shutters rattle, and everyone in the hut has gone quiet but you. The moonlight sneaks through a crack in the wall, just enough to make you see shapes that aren't really there. A knot in the wood becomes an eye. A fold in the blanket looks like a face. You shut your eyes tightly, but it doesn't help. Your imagination is awake now, and it's doing laps. Your sister once claimed she saw the Frost Widow, a woman with icicle hair and eyes like frozen rivers, standing at the edge of the forest. She said the woman didn't move, just stared, until the fog swallowed her. No one believed her. But she never went near that side of the woods again. Even now, when you walk past it, you walk a little faster. You finally open your eyes again and focus on the embers. Safer to look at something warm and real. The dog shifts at your feet. The fire pops once, sharp. You jump. Your heart thuds. Then you laugh quietly at yourself. Sort of. Quirky tidbit? In some alpine villages, they believed that snowstorms were caused by spirits spinning in the sky, literally weaving weather from cloud and wind. If the snow landed too heavy, it meant the spirit was angry. You're not alpine, but the idea has a certain charm. Less terrifying than a demon is watching you from the tree line, anyway. The truth is, these stories serve you. They give shape to fear. They offer cause and consequence. Don't steal, or the lantern man will find you. Don't ignore the sick, or the hollow child will knock at your door. They guide behavior more effectively than a dozen sermons. Still, you'd sleep easier without them. You turn over again and look across the room. Everyone's asleep. Or trying. Your cousin coughs once, a thin, dry noise. The chicken rustles in its sack. The dog is gently kicking in its sleep, probably chasing that pig again. You close your eyes. Focus on the sounds. The fire. The breathing. The not ghosts. Try not to think about that time you swear you saw something move past the window. That was just the wind. Or the neighbor. Or your imagination. Definitely not the ash dog. You whisper a little charm your grandmother taught you, a nonsense rhyme, barely a prayer, but comforting in its rhythm. Something about turning circles in the air and leaving your name behind. She said it kept dreams soft. You've never told anyone you still do it. And now the dreams come. Not the nice kind, where you're in a warm meadow eating cheese with both hands. No, these are the other kind. Shadows at the foot of the bed. Snowflakes falling inside the house. A knock that comes from under the floor. You wake with a gasp, disoriented, still tangled in the ragged threads of sleep and fear. The fire has burned low again. You pull the blanket over your head and will your body to relax. The dog presses against your feet, a solid snoring barrier against the dark. You let yourself believe, just for a moment, that it's enough. That the myths can't cross the firelight. That your whispered charm works. Historians will debate the origins of these tales. You just know they're part of your life. They wrap around the cold, settle in your straw bed, whisper through the rafters when the wind comes down from the hill. They scare you, but they keep you company too. You think about that as you finally start to drift again, eyes heavy, heart slower. The night is still full of strange noises, but you're tired enough not to care. Your last thought before sleep takes you is simple. Please don't dream about the frost widow again. You don't wake up on your own. You're called awake. The sound is sharp, metallic, echoing faintly across the snow-covered village. Clang, clang, clang. 3 short rings, then a pause, then one long one. Your eyes snap open, instinct pulling your brain out of sleep before it's ready. The church bell. You groan. Your limbs are lead. Your mouth tastes like wool and wood smoke. But you know the bell doesn't care. It never has. It rings whether you're ready or not, whether you slept or not, whether you're still dreaming of that warm spring day when no one needed anything from you. You push off your blanket, feeling the immediate rush of cold as it grabs at your skin like an eager ghost. The dog sighs and shuffles deeper into the bedding. Smart dog. You roll your neck, stretch once, and pull on your layers in silence. Tunic, cloak, mittens, hat if you're lucky. There's no such thing as sleeping in. Not when the bell rings. Mainstream historical fact. Church bells regulated daily life across medieval Europe. From labor to prayer, they marked time in communities where no one owned a clock and sunlight was an unreliable partner in winter. The first bell often rang at matins, well before dawn, calling the devout, or just the obedient, to stir. Outside, the sky is still a dark smear above the thatch roofs, only barely touched by the promise of light. You crunch across the frozen ground toward the chapel, slipping once, but catching yourself on instinct. The village is waking, slowly, like a reluctant beast. Doors open, shadows move. Cold breath curls from mouths too tired to form words. You pass the baker's hut. No smoke from the chimney yet. He must be late. You keep walking, stick in hand more for balance than defense, and join the slow trickle of people heading to morning prayers. You don't always go to the church, but when the bell calls, you usually do. Not because you fear divine judgment, though that's certainly a factor, but because everyone goes. Not showing up makes people talk. And in a village this small, talk spreads faster than the common cold. You step inside the wooden chapel, the air thick with candle smoke and wet wool. The pews are damp. The floor is uneven. But the fire near the altar is going strong, and for that, you're grateful. You take your seat, kneel, stand, cross yourself. The rhythm is familiar, comforting even, in a slightly numbing way. The priest begins in Latin. You don't understand half of it, but you murmur the right syllables at the right times. It's like a song you've memorized phonetically. Some people say it brings them closer to God. You're just hoping it brings you closer to spring. Your neighbor is dozing. The old woman in front of you keeps pulling her shawl tighter, mumbling about a draft. The boy next to her sneezes directly into his sleeve. The candles flicker, throwing dancing shadows across the wall. You let your eyes unfocus. You almost drift. Almost. The bell rings again outside. Just one solid clang. The priest doesn't flinch. You don't either. It's just another signal. Probably the hour. Or maybe someone's died. Could be either. Bells are versatile like that. Historians still argue whether peasants felt connected to the church or just tolerated it. You'd say, both. It's the only structure built of stone, the only building with color, stained glass, if your village is lucky. It's where you bury your dead, bless your children, beg for healing. And it's also where you're told, gently but firmly, that suffering is part of life, and you should really stop complaining. You file out after the service, nodding to the priest, who looks exactly as tired as you feel. The sun is barely up, but the chores are already calling. You stop by the well for water, your fingers barely able to grip the icy bucket. The rope squeaks as you lower it down. You think of bells again. Some people are lucky enough to live close to the church and hear the bell clearly. Others rely on echo. There's a man on the far edge of the village who swears he times his day by the vibration in the ground. You're not sure if he's joking. He probably isn't. Quirky tidbit. In some places, bells were believed to chase off evil spirits with their sound waves. A bell rung during a storm could drive away demons, bad weather, or even disease. You like that idea. That sound equals safety. Noise means nothing sneaky is creeping up behind you. You trudge home, bucket in hand, legs starting to wake up. A few others are already hauling wood. Someone's breaking ice near the cattle trough. It's a slow ballet of winter survival. No one speaks much before the second bell. You're just trying to make it through the morning. Back inside your hut, the fire has perked up a little. Your sister is stirring a pot of barley. Your cousin is still coughing. The pig has rolled over into the warmest corner again. You set the bucket down and sit by the fire, rubbing your hands together and soaking in what little comfort it gives. The bell rings one more time, distant but firm. It's time to get moving. Again. Because the bell won't wait. It never does. You're hunched over a tunic with a needle so blunt it could qualify as a spoon. Your fingers, numb from the cold, fumble with the coarse thread. You're trying to patch a hole in the shoulder. Again. The wool is stubborn, frayed, and smells like smoke and regret. You squint in the firelight, which flickers just enough to keep your vision inconsistent, like sewing under a strobe. Outside, the wind howls. Inside, your patience unravels stitch by stitch. The tunic isn't even yours. It belongs to your brother, who ripped it on a nail while trying to outrun a particularly ambitious goose. It's one of only two he owns, and the other one is still drying from yesterday's unfortunate run-in with some unmentionable animal sludge. So here you are, making do. Mainstream fact: most peasants only owned one or two sets of clothes, and repairing garments was a constant task. New clothes were rare and precious, usually reserved for feast days, weddings, or being buried. If something ripped, it got mended, by firelight, by necessity, and often by someone squinting until they saw stars. You make a clumsy stitch, then another. Your knuckles crack. You stab yourself in the thumb for the third time tonight, wince, and mutter a few words that the priest would not appreciate. A little blood seeps into the fabric. You dab it away with a rag and keep going. No one's checking for neatness. Next to you, your aunt is spinning wool. The spindle turns slowly, rhythmically, twisting rough fibers into slightly less rough thread. It's hypnotic. You try to match your stitching pace to hers, just to feel like there's a system to this madness. She hums under her breath. It's a song about St. Bridget and some bees. You hum along, off-key. Quirky tidbit: some folk believed that spinning or sewing on certain days, especially Sundays, brought bad luck. One woman in your village swore that sewing after sundown would tangle the threads of fate and make your children cross-eyed. Another claimed that sewing through linen too fast invited weevils. You don't know if it's true, but you still glance over your shoulder when your stitches get too neat. Your needle bends. Again. You straighten it against the edge of the hearthstone and keep going. You remember when this tunic was new. It had crisp seams, tight stitching, even a bit of dyed trim. It was a gift from a neighboring family, part of a trade for a piglet. That piglet later ate a shoe, but the tunic held up. Until now. Now it's just another piece of fabric in need of resurrection. Historians still argue whether peasants regularly made their own clothes or bartered for them from specialists like weavers and tailors. In truth, most did both. Basic mending and stitching was a family affair. But if you needed something fancy, like sleeves that actually matched, you'd turn to someone who didn't stab themselves every 5 minutes. You pause to warm your hands near the fire. Your fingertips are raw, your shoulders sore. Sewing is quiet work, but that doesn't make it easy. Especially not in winter, when your muscles are already tight from chopping wood, hauling water, and just existing in the cold. The dog stirs beside you and sniffs your thread. You gently shoo him away. He sighs and lays his head on your foot, radiating just enough warmth to make you reluctant to move. Ever. You finish the seam and knot it. Not pretty, but functional. That's the peasant motto. Not pretty, but functional. You hold the tunic up, admire your mostly straight stitching, and hand it over. Your brother gives you a grunt of appreciation and immediately tugs it on over his shift. He flexes the repaired shoulder with dramatic flair. "Itchy," he says. "Good," you reply. You turn back to your basket of clothes. There's a sock to darn, a hole in your own cloak to patch, and someone needs new mittens entirely. You've already started spinning bits of old wool into thread for that. It's not the good kind, but it's all you've got. You set the sock aside for now. It's less a sock and more a wool tube with dreams. It'll need a serious intervention. Outside, you hear a familiar sound. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Someone is splitting firewood. You sigh. That'll be your next task. But for now, you sew. Your cousin brings over a tunic with a rip along the hem. "Can you?" You nod before she even finishes. You don't talk much while you work. It's meditative. A way to make something whole again in a world where everything else is slowly falling apart. Every stitch is a tiny rebellion against the wear and tear of frost, mud, and time. You think about the future, vaguely. Maybe when spring comes, you'll try to trade for some better cloth. Something dyed. Maybe a tunic with sleeves that actually match in length. You've heard of people with red tunics. Imagine. Fringe detail? In some regions, villagers added secret embroidery patterns inside their garments, symbols for luck, protection, or fertility. You once stitched a crooked star into your cloak's lining after a long winter sickness. You don't know if it worked, but you're still here. The fire crackles. Someone is boiling nettle leaves again, probably for tea, possibly for dye, hopefully not for a stew. The room is thick with smoke and thread lint. You stab your thumb again. You don't even flinch this time. Just suck the blood and keep stitching. It's the peasant way. The snow is melting. Not fast. Just enough to turn the yard into a sucking mire of half-thawed mud and animal waste. But you can feel it. In the air. In your bones. The wind no longer slices. It nudges. The sun, bless it, has finally decided to put in a little effort. It isn't warm yet, but it's trying. You step outside and squint. Your eyes aren't used to brightness. The world is still brown and gray and sagging from the weight of months of cold. But there's something new in the air. Drip, drip, drip. Water. Honest to goodness, melting water. You smile. Spring's not here, but it's thinking about it. You trudge through the slush, slipping once, catching yourself on a fence post. The chickens are pecking half-heartedly in the muck. The pig's nose is covered in mud. and she looks, if pigs can look smug, completely satisfied. The goat has found something green and is gnawing it like it's the key to eternal life. Inside the hut, things smell different. Less smoke, more earth. The fire still burns, but no one's sitting on top of it anymore. You've even opened the door for a few minutes to let in fresh air and chase out the ghosts of too many closed nights. Your cousin is standing by the hearth, stretching like a cat in a sunbeam. His cough's not gone, but it's no longer the only thing you hear. He eats more now, sleeps more. The worst of it, you hope, is behind. Mainstream fact? For medieval peasants, late winter into early spring was the hardest stretch, the hunger gap, when food stores ran low, but the land hadn't yet yielded anything new. But once the thaw began, life returned. Slowly, cautiously, like a rabbit sticking its nose out of a burrow. You head to the well and haul up a bucket. It doesn't fight you today. The ice is thinning. The rope doesn't squeal as much. You take a sip and swear it tastes fresher. You wash your hands without wanting to scream. Just that alone feels like a miracle. You glance around the yard and start making a mental list. Repair the roof. Some of the thatch blew off during the last storm. Mend the gate where the pig keeps escaping. Plant onions. Start the compost pile again. Sharpen tools. Scrub everything. The work never ends, but the feeling of it changes. Before, it was survival. Now, it's preparation. You walk past the field. It's still brown, soggy, and lifeless. But there's a patch of grass trying to rise near the edge. The first green you've seen in months. You stare at it for a long time. Inside again, your sister is patching her cloak. Not because it's urgently needed, but because now there's time to fix things properly. The rush of survival has slowed. You sit beside her and offer to help. She smiles and hands you a needle. Quirky tidbit. Some villagers believed that if you saw a bee before the first full thaw, it meant an early and abundant harvest. You haven't seen a bee, but you did see a wasp crawling out of the wall yesterday. You crushed it. But still, symbolism, maybe? The priest stopped by earlier, walking carefully along the mucky path. He brought a blessing for the end of the cold season. Said the church roof had finally stopped leaking. You gave him a loaf of what passed for bread. He gave you a prayer you didn't quite catch, but you appreciated the gesture. Historians still argue whether spring festivals marked agricultural optimism or simply the deep psychological need to celebrate anything after surviving winter. For your part, you think it's both. You want music, dancing, a day without boots. You light a candle at dusk, not for warmth, but for light. The fire burns lower, but no one panics. You've started to let the embers fade without hovering like a desperate squirrel with a stick. The nights are still cold, but you're no longer afraid of them. That night, you dream, not of frost or hunger or coughing in the dark, but of planting seeds in warm soil. Your hands are dirty in a good way. You see the pig lying in a patch of sun, the goat chewing something she shouldn't, the sky wide and blue. You wake up smiling. The hut smells like earth and wool. Someone's boiling herbs again. But this time it's for tea, not illness. You stretch, you stand, and you start another day. You made it through. And now, as the last frost melts away and your bones stretch toward the promise of warmer days, you feel it, the quiet hum of survival. The season shifts, slow and soft, and you, wrapped in wool and stubbornness, have weathered it. The wind, once a cruel intruder, is now just a whisper through the branches. The walls of your hut creak a little less. The fire burns a little lower. You pull the blanket up to your chin and let your shoulders soften, the tension of months slowly lifting from your frame like mist from a thawing field. Your breath slows. Your fingers, calloused and cracked, rest gently on your chest. The aches you've carried for so long begin to fade, replaced by a lightness you almost forgot existed. Somewhere outside, a bird sings. Just one note. A test. You smile in your sleep. The stories, the myths, the cold, they fade into the background now, replaced by the slow rhythm of the earth waking up. You don't need to be alert anymore. The wolves are quiet. The hearth is warm. The door is closed. You've earned this. So let your mind drift now, away from the straw beds and frost-bitten mornings, from cloaks and cracked bread and scratching at invisible bites. Let it settle into something softer. Let the quiet wrap around you like a second blanket. You're safe. You're home. The cold is leaving. Sleep now. Sleep.